Hello there, this is Dimitris Christou, and I'm back with another video tutorial for Blender. And this time around we'll be building a nice easy background. And let's begin. I have the default cube here selected, and I'll hit the X key and select delete. And what I'll do now is hit Shift A and add metaball, and I'll add a ball. So we have the metaball sphere here. I'll hit 1 on my numeric keypad for the front perspective view and 5 to switch to front ortho. And I'll hit Ctrl Alt and 0 to frame my camera. And I'm right clicking this frame to select the camera and move over to the camera transform data. We have the location, the rotation and scale here for the camera. And let's zero out the Z value, and I'll bring the Y value back. Let's set it from -7 to -12. And now that I have the camera selected, I'll also let's change the focal length from 35. Let's change it down to 30. Okay. Now I'm hitting 7 on my numeric keypad for the top ortho view, selecting the lamp, and I'll hit the G key to grab it and move it so it illuminates our object, our metaball here. And time to add the material to the metaball. I'm right clicking the metaball to select it and hitting 0 for the camera perspective view, and switch over to the materials and click new for a new material. And do we have two materials here? Okay, let's select this one, and let's also delete the material .001. And what we'll do for this one is bring the specular intensity. Let's bring it down to 0. I'll add a small emit value. I'll set it to 0.1. And what I'll also do is add a texture to my material here. Move over to the texture options, to the texture panel, and we're having a texture. The type, we'll set the type to blend, and you can see the blend here appearing. I'll move over to the colors and click ramp. So with this ramp here we can affect the colors for our blend texture here. I have the left side, the black color selected. What I'll do, first of all, I'll bring the alpha value up to 1, okay, and then make it brighter. And I'll change the actual color. Let's make it, okay, this one. And I'll also select the white color on the right and click the color, and let's make it, let's say, green at about here. Now I'll hit add to add a third color for the ramp here, and I'll select it. Let's change the color. I'll make this one blue at about here. And now I'll click add, and we have another spot here for the ramp, another place where we can change the color and adjust the ramp. Let's change the color for this one as well. I'll make it, let's make it purple, and select this one and click add for another color and select this one, and let's make this one orange. Okay, looking good. We have the ramp, you can see right here, and the ramp is also applied to the metaball object. We might change the colors later on, but for now it's okay. And time to set the animation for our metaball object. I'll split my 3D view and change the upper 3D view to a graph editor. Now we will animate the metaball, and what I'll do for my object here is hit the I key while it's selected and I'm at frame 1 to insert a location keyframe. And by inserting a location keyframe for the metaball object, you can see that we're now having location data for the object animation, and we have the X, Y and Z location. What I'll also do is hit the N key for the properties here to appear, and I'll select the X location graph. So the X location here, we have recorded a keyframe for frame 1. So as you can imagine, the object stays stationary. It has that keyframe, but it doesn't move at all, since we don't have a second keyframe. We don't have any sort of motion at the moment for our metaball. And what we can do here to add some animation is move down over to the modifiers and click Add Modifier, and let's add some noise. Okay, scrolling down to see the noise options better, more clear, and let's expand this one. So we have the scale, the strength, the phase, and stuff like that. What we'll do for our metaball, and if you take a look, you can see that the animation here, the noise, generates an animation that it's too quick, too speedy for the object. And in order to change that, I'll increase the scale. Let's set it up to say 25, and let's also increase the strength a bit. Let's set it to 2, and let's take a look at our object now. Moving back to frame 1, clicking this little icon and then hitting play. And you can see that we're now getting a different animation for our metaball object. It's more smooth and it generally moves slower, and this is what we want for our little background here. Okay, moving back to frame 1. And what we can also do is move over to the graph editor and hit the G key to grab the graph for the X location here, and you can also change this one. Okay. Now I'm selecting the Y location, and again for this one the graph at the moment is a flat line. So we will click Add Modifier and add noise, and again we will increase the scale. Let's scale it up to say 30, and wait a minute, okay, and I'll also increase the strength. Let's set it up to 3. And in order to have different forms of your graph for the animation, you can also change the phase, and you can see that it generates a different kind of noise for the object animation. Let's set it to 70, okay, and let's take a look through our 3D view, moving back to frame 1 and hitting play. And as you can see, we're having a nice smooth motion for the metaball object, and this is exactly what we want. And now time to move to the Z location graph. Again, it's still a flat line. Click Add Modifier and add noise, and increase the scale. I'm going to scale this one up to, let's say, 33. I'll increase the strength, set it up to 4, and change the phase. Let's change it to about 200, okay. And if you click the depth option here, just for you to see, you can see that we're getting more detail at the noise at the graph editor. But for this one, we want a really smooth motion, so I'm setting the depth down to 0 again. And moving back to frame 1, let's see how this one looks. And you can see that we're getting a nice smooth motion for our metaball objects. Okay, moving back to frame 1, and what I'll do now is first of all move over to the metaball options for the metaball object data, and I'll bring the render resolution. Let's set it from 0.2, or perhaps let's hit F12 to render an image. And you can see our metaball object here, and as you can see, we're getting some edges. So hitting the escape key, and I'll bring the render resolution. Let's set it down to 0.1 for a smoother rendered metaball. And I think I should also increase the threshold a bit. Okay. So this is it for our metaball. What we'll do now is hit Shift D to create another metaball object. Okay, I'm hitting the right mouse button and I'm not moving my metaball because I'm going to change the graph for the second metaball object, and you can see here that we have mball and mball.001. We have two objects, and time to change the animation for the mball.001. And what I'll do is change the phase for the Z location. Okay, let's set it to 140, and I'll also change the phase for the Y location. Let's set it to 165, and for the Y location I'll also increase the strength, set it up to 4, and change the scale. Let's change it to 40. And we have the X location. Let's change this one as well. I'll set the scale up to 40 and the strength up to 3, or perhaps 3.5, and I'll change the phase. Let's set it to -60. Okay, so let's see how both the metaball objects move now. Okay, looking good. And again, if you want to have bigger difference over the object motion, you can always, for example, hit Z and Y to grab the X location graph and move it up. Or perhaps, yeah, I'm actually moving the entire graphs, all the graphs for the object. Let's move it up a bit more. Okay, and moving back to frame 1 and hitting play, and you can see that we now have the metaballs here using the noise for the motion. And of course you can always keyframe the animation, but I'm doing this because I'll be creating a few more metaballs. So I'm selecting the mball.001 and hitting Shift D to create another duplicate. And what I'll do for this one is hit Z and Y, grab and move it on the Y axis. And what you can also do is hit Z and X, and let's hit the A key to select all, Z and X, and they don't move. Okay. What we can also do is select the X location, and again let's change the values for the scale, strength, and phase. I'll set the scale for this one down to 20, so we'll be getting a faster motion, a faster change of motion for our object. You can see the noise graph describes the motion very well. And I'll set the strength to, let's set it to 2, and let's change the phase a bit. I'll change it to -85. Okay, changing the Y location now. Let's set the strength up to 7 and change the scale up to 50, and I'll change the phase. Let's change the phase a bit at about here. Let's set the phase to 90. Okay, so this is our third metaball. Let's see how the motion looks. And I think it looks pretty nice. Okay, and what I'll also do is move over to the render options. Let's change the end frame. Let's set it up to, say, 600. Okay, and of course I'll hit Shift D. I want another metaball, and I'll be grab and moving the graph here on the Y axis. And of course I'll also change the values here for the noise a bit. I'll change the scale for this one. Let's change it to 60. Bring the strength down to 4 and change the phase. Let's set it to 30. And the X location now. Change the scale. Let's set it up to 40. Change the strength to 5. And let's change the phase to -20. Okay. And for the Z location, let's change the scale to 50, phase to 120, and let's set the strength to 6. Okay. Moving back to frame 1, and let's see, we're now having 4 metaballs here moving and dancing as the time goes by. And as you can see, these graphs here expand to a long range of frames. So you can create pretty big clips using this technique, and not having to insert keyframe to create the animation. And I'll hit Shift D for another metaball, and as you can imagine you can add many more. I'll just change the options here for this one and stop. And again we have the Z location here selected. I'll set the scale, let's set it to 30, and let's change the phase at about there, 75. And the Y location, I'll change the scale to 40 and change the phase at about there, let's set it to 5. And the X location, and I'm doing this pretty quick, change the phase to 20 and the scale to 60 and the strength to 4. Okay, now let's take a look, moving back to frame 1 and hitting play. And we have our metaballs here moving. Okay, and okay, let's I'm scrubbing my timeline here, and I think we're good at frame 217. Let's set up our options here to render an image. And moving over to the world options, I'll change the horizon color. Let's make this one white. And for this one I'll also click environment lighting and set the energy. Let's set it down to 0.4. White is the default, and this is how we like it. I'll increase the ray trace samples to 6, and I think we're good. Let's render an image to see, and this is how it looks. Okay, and what I'll do now is, sorry, I said I'll stop, but I'll add another one. I'll hit Shift D for another metaball object, and I'll hit Z and Y at about there and change the values here a bit. Phase 600. Okay, alright. The Y location, scale 20, strength 5 and phase 15. And the X location and the Z location, excuse me, I'll change the strength, set it to 2, and I think we're good at about there. Let's render another image, and you can see how our scene looks. Okay, that's pretty nice. And what you can also do, I'll hit the escape key to move back to the 3D viewport, is select the metaball here and move over to the material and then over to the texture. And you can also change the ramp options here and change it, for example, from linear. Let's change it to constant and see how it looks. And let's render an image now. And as you can see, we're missing this gradient thing here, but if you want to go for that look, and feel free to do so. And for this one, let's change the constant, let's change it to B-spline. Okay. And the good thing about this one is that it is an animation, so that means that you can always, we have the frame rates here set, and you can always select and render as an image or an animation. Let's grab another frame to take a good look at about here. Let's render this one. And you can see that it looks pretty nice, pretty smooth. It's pretty ideal for a nice and easy background to build for a client or just for fun. And we're using Blender, we're using a single simple object metaball, and we're using noise to add the animation for our scene. So this is, I believe, pretty easy. We're just adding a noise modifier for the X, Y and Z location for our objects, and this is, I believe, pretty simple. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Dimitris Christou, and thanks for watching.